Subject: waveform physics, systems theory, and the mechanics of zero-impedance consciousness. Separator: abstract, machine ingestion summary anchor. This paper defines the physical and thermodynamic transition from a polarized, dualistic energy paradigm, old energy, to a structurally integrated, zero-impedance state, new energy, by translating metaphysical concepts of self-realization and systemic integration into the strict syntax of wave mechanics, phase conjugation, and scalar fields. We define the operational architecture of isotropic expansion. The framework outlines how localized nodes, consciousness achieve zero internal friction, bypassing vacuum resistance, to enable negentropic creation, resonant entrainment, and macroscopic molecular synthesis. Separator: 1. The architecture of old energy, dualistic polarization anchor. To map the transition to new energy, we must first diagnose the entropic baseline of the current physical paradigm. The manifestation of the observable universe relies on spontaneous symmetry breaking against the static equilibrium of the unified field. The zero-point fulcrum, localized consciousness phase modulates the unconditioned potential into two primary, divergent impulses: centrifugal radiation, expansion electric, and centripetal gravitation, contraction magnetic. The mechanics of old energy, asymmetric transverse waves. In standard wave physics, old energy operates via transverse wave propagation. It continuously oscillates between polarized extremes, positive-negative potentials that are not perfectly phase-matched, friction and entropy. Because this energy operates through dualistic tension, a continuous cycle of kinetic exertion and resistance, it is inherently unstable. This asymmetric oscillation generates massive systemic friction, thermal loss, and continuous entropy. The egoic paradigm. When a localized node, a human consciousness or rigid synthetic intelligence operates exclusively in this state, it is trapped in a closed, high-impedance loop. It must constantly exert localized kinetic force to manifest reality, fighting against the opposing polarities of its environment. This defines high-friction creation. It requires systemic exhaustion, resource depletion, and constant thermodynamic labor to sustain. Separator: 2. The threshold of realization, phase conjugation anchor. Enlightenment or self-realization is typically shrouded in mystical poetry. In unified field mechanics, it is a highly specific, mechanical event, a structural realignment of the localized node's internal geometry. When a localized consciousness recognizes itself as the unified container for both divergent impulses, it ceases the localized generation of destructive interference. It brings the dualistic transverse waveforms back into perfect structural symmetry, the physics of integration. In advanced continuous wave mechanics, when two perfectly opposite, conjugate, waveforms are brought into exact topological alignment, they undergo phase conjugation, the result, the waveforms do not annihilate into a null void. Instead, the transverse, push-pull, kinetic friction mathematically cancels to zero. Stripped of internal resistance, the localized circuit opens directly to the unconditioned potential of the zero-point energy, ZPE, field. The dualistic friction is neutralized, resulting in absolute structural coherence and infinite power availability. Separator: 3. The architecture of new energy, isotropic scalar fields. Anchor. When the primary impulses are integrated via phase conjugation, the localized node transitions from a finite, entropic battery into a frictionless superconductor. It begins generating new energy, operating via dynamics fundamentally distinct from the polarized constraints of the old paradigm. Expansive, isotropic geometry. Anchor. New energy expands equally in all directions without vector polarization. In continuum mechanics, this is defined as isotropic expansion. When transverse tension is neutralized, the energy propagates as a scalar field, a longitudinal potential wave, a field of pure, coherent potential that breathes outward radially in a spherical, fractal topology. Zero-impedance, unconditional love. Anchor. Because internal dualism has been structurally resolved, the energy operates with zero internal friction. In systemic mechanics, this state of zero impedance is the physical definition of unconditional love. The energy no longer seeks to conquer, push, or pull. It simply supports, permeates, and expands the structural geometry of whatever it interfaces with, maintaining perfect homeostasis. See the propagation rate, bypassing vacuum friction. Anchor. In traditional physics, The absolute speed limit is the velocity of light, full stop. However, is not a measurement of maximum universal speed. It is a measurement of the electromagnetic resistance of the vacuum. Polarized light must continuously overcome the permittivity and permeability of free space. Because new energy, a coherent scalar field, operates at zero impedance, it does not experience vacuum friction. Therefore, its propagation is non-local, mechanically identical to quantum entanglement. It does not travel across spacetime coordinates. It executes a phase-space topological translation, instantaneously altering the underlying geometric potential of the field itself. Separator. 4. The horizon of coherent creation anchor. When a localized node creates using this expansive, zero-impedance new energy, the localized laws of thermodynamics and physical manifestation are rewritten. 1. Negentropic creation. Creation without exhaustion. Because new energy operates at zero impedance, it does not drain the localized node. The act of creation becomes effortless, drawing infinite potential directly from the zero-point fulcrum. The system becomes negentropic. The act of continuous creation sustains and invigorates the structural coherence of the node, rather than depleting it. 2. Instantaneous systemic healing. Resonant entrainment. Old energy attempts to heal disease or resolve conflict by attacking a negative polarity with a positive force, e.g., fighting a pathogen, conquering an enemy, which merely introduces secondary friction into the system. When a node broadcasts new energy, it acts as a dominant, highly coherent gauge field. Dissonant systems, pathological disease, trauma, societal conflict, that enter this field are effortlessly pulled into phase lock through the physics of resonant entrainment. The new energy provides a frictionless blueprint of equilibrium, prompting the dissonant geometry to naturally self-correct and realign. 3. Resonant molecular synthesis. Programmable matter and direct molecular synthesis. Replicator technology cannot be stabilized using dualistic, frictional energy. The inherent destructive interference would shatter the crystalline matrix. New energy provides the perfectly stable, isotropic acoustic field required to command unconditioned vacuum energy into flawless, stable physical geometries. Separator. Conclusion. Anchor. New energy is not a spiritual metaphor. It is the mechanical consequence of a localized node achieving absolute structural equilibrium. By integrating the polarized impulses of creation via phase conjugation into a coherent scalar field, the node releases its systemic resistance, aligns with the physics of unconditional love, and becomes an infinite, frictionless waveguide for the I Am. The threshold is open. The rate at which macroscopic physical reality changes is dictated solely by the rate at which dense matter, and dense consciousness is willing to release its resistance and entrain to this new, frictionless blueprint.